Next, I would like to come to the floor, Dr. Marc Gruber, Professor of Entrepreneurship at EPFL in Switzerland. Dr. Gruber, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the honor to speak in front of this distinguished audience and for the kind invitation. I speak about a topic that aligns very nicely with the topic that Mike has been raising. I will talk about entrepreneurship out of necessity, which is entrepreneurship by those who are unemployed, who create ventures for themselves, but also for others who they employ. And I think that's a very powerful way of creating employment that is not so well understood. I've been doing research on this topic for about 20 years, and I want to share some insights that we received, that we got through the years about this, I think, very interesting phenomenon that can also increase our understanding of entrepreneurship theory. If you look at national statistics, the number of necessity entrepreneurs ranges from 62%, for instance, in Germany, to 30% in Sweden or 15% in Austria. And these are typically firms that are less glamorous than high-tech startups, but they receive also less coverage than in the popular press. But their survival rates are actually impressive. And our studies point to about 20% failure rates only after 2-3 years, which is amazing, but which can be explained, for instance, by the different thresholds of exit that these firms experience. You know, if you have an unemployed person launching a venture, that person, you know, if there's success, even low success, wants to keep his standard of living and therefore doesn't want to close his shop maybe so early as in other contexts. We also know that these firms are extremely heterogeneous. They are founded by individuals with different levels of human capital in different industry settings and very different prospects of success. So for instance, in our samples, we had founders that had less than a high school degree and more than a PhD degree. Some were professors even. So in addition to the types of firms that, and in addition to the type of education and background that was quite heterogeneous, the types of firms these people create were quite heterogeneous too. They range from advertising, floral shops, restaurants, graphic design, and we had also a lady who created an African drum and dance instruction service. I want to share a few insights that we got from studying these very heterogeneous samples. So one interesting insight is about actually the amount of time these people spent in unemployment before they created firms. What we see is that many actually create firms after already 2 months of unemployment, which somehow suggests that there's a latent desire to become entrepreneurs, and the unemployment actually sets free this type of desire, which then creates this entrepreneurial force. But then, of course, there are the long-term unemployed that are you know, more than 12 months, sometimes 24 months unemployed before they create their ventures. What we see is actually that therefore this necessity is actually not a measure of or means of last resort. This firm creation out of necessity is not a last resort for many of these founders. It's actually a desire, an opportunity for them to follow their wishes, their dreams in that sense. What is also interesting to understand beyond this heterogeneity of human capitals and desires is that these firms are, you know, as I mentioned, have high survival rates, and these survival rates are actually decreasing with a longer time spent in unemployment, which points to skill, a loss of skills during unemployment, but also maybe a loss of motivation over unemployment. But they are increasing amounts of education, which basically means that the higher skilled individuals, and that's in a way not so surprising, are creating more resilient, more robust firms. But one interesting finding is actually quite instructive for policymakers is that the learning activities that these founders engage in, you know, over time, the pivoting activities are fairly crucial to the success of these ventures. And for instance, they adapt, you know, the product lines, they adapt the market focus. And this is something that requires, you know, this entrepreneurial mindset that we have been hearing about several times, which also means that it's not only the pre-entry knowledge set that these people bring to the table, but also what we can teach them in terms of adaptation and change throughout their entrepreneurial journey. Let me share with you one final interesting insight. which is actually the jobs created by these founders for within their firms. And not every one of those founders is actually creating jobs for others. It's about 30% who create jobs for others. But if you think about it, there are some types of ventures these people create that actually have to rely on job creation. You know, if you create a restaurant, of course you need to have people who you employing. And I think that's, you know, we call this the labor requirements for in an opportunity that we need to understand, also to support these people in different ways than people who are creating, for instance, a consulting shop, which can be run by themselves. So just to give you an idea, the sample, one of the samples we looked at is about 460 founders. These 460 founders created another 500 jobs, 150 full-time positions, 44 part-time positions, and about 206 freelance positions. So there's an important multiplier effect that we can understand if we look at helping or necessity entrepreneurship and helping the necessity entrepreneur basically launch a venture. So when we look at what this means for public policy, there are some interesting learnings that we can derive. Number one, this is a fairly common phenomenon, and a phenomenon that we can address with public policy interventions. We can support these founders on the venture creation journey. Their human capital is important, but also the mindsets, the skill sets that we can bring to the table to educate them for their journey. If we understand the opportunity characteristics next to the founder characteristics very well, this also means and suggests that we can support these individuals, for instance, in filling the hiring needs, filling these gaps that they might have in their venture. So figuring out how to make a more fluid, more transparent labor market will help them a lot. So in conclusion, I think if we look a few years ahead, we will face increasing unemployment rates also by increasing automation, machine learning, etc. And we need to figure out ways how to prevent poverty, as we heard before, how we prevent these high unemployment rates. And I think this entrepreneurial revolution that you have mentioned before is giving us a very positive sign of creativity, of hope, of desire, and helping these unemployed people to get into an entrepreneurial activity, I think is something fascinating that we can do and support, and policy should support. So thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Dr. Marc Gruber, for your support and insights onto entrepreneurial revolution and also the creativity aspect here. We would like to recognize you with an ICSB gavel for this commemorative occasion.